Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now if you're like me and you were born after 1995, you probably grew up with this movie always being there. But there's others who experienced the original trilogy and didn't really have a positive experience when it came to Phantom Menace. So, me growing up with Phantom Menace, I probably had a strange sort of relationship to it. I guess it's sort of like this. You see it differently as a kid as you would as an adult. You'd see it as something more of a fun action piece as a kid who kind of just like sees the action scenes as the best bits, but doesn't really care about the dialogue or the Senate stuff. As you get older, the film decreases in quality. It's more the film, you find that a film that you've learned to love over the years is not really something you can hold on to anymore. As you see other films, you realise that The Phantom Menace is not really as perfect as you once thought it would be. I guess that's one of the reasons why Force Awakens did so well, is that the stigma for the prequels was gone. You could see there was a difference. You could see that The Force Awakens had improved because of the prequels were there and they knew what to do now. The prequels are kind of a guideline of what you should do and shouldn't do with filmmaking. How you can use CGI, but you wouldn't want to use it too much, because if you overuse CGI, people can disconnect from it if there's too much CGI. The Force Awakens, they knew how to use enough CGI for the purposes they needed. I see with Phantom Menace that there was way too much, and all those scenes set in Coruscant and Naboo and all that stuff, basically the entire prequel trilogy, you didn't really feel like it was real, and it wasn't really tangible like it was in The Force Awakens, or even the original trilogy. I'd say that Phantom Menace is a good film, but it's not great. It has good story beats for the most part, and the culmination of the final fight scene between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Darth Maul is very well choreographed. It's kind of like saying you have a punnet of strawberries, but there's only one good one in a sea of just terrible ones. I'd say that the Star Wars films improve, like the prequels improve as they go along, but they don't improve enough. You see the Phantom Menace, and then you go from that to Attack the Clones, and then to Revenge of the Sith, and you realise that they could have been so much better. Belated Media has a very good set of videos about that. I'm not going to go into that right now. Really, their biggest downfall was creating the character of Jar Jar Binks. He's not a very good character, because the reason why Jar Jar Binks isn't a good character is he lends too much on a comedic side that doesn't really land. If you were trying to make a character that you would sympathise with, he wouldn't be as stupid as well. They make him... what George tried to do was make him lovably stupid. But then, when you try and do that, it doesn't really come across as being a likable character. He just becomes some really stupid... He comes across as being a character that's not very likable because he has low intelligence. If he actually had some wits, you'd say, oh, I actually care about this Jar Jar character, instead of just being a bumbling idiot who can't really do anything properly. That's one of the biggest problems with Phantom Menace. Also, one of their other biggest problems is they don't really have a main character that they can lean on. You've got... Well, let's say that the character of the entire prequel trilogy is Anakin. You can say that we follow Anakin throughout all the films. But the problem with that is that you don't meet Anakin until like halfway through the film. You don't meet Anakin until halfway through the film, where he's just sitting around doing work from Watto. But when you meet Anakin halfway through the film, and he's just some slave boy that doesn't really have much character at all, but he just wants to get out of there. And the problem with that is that you can't have a main character that doesn't show up, like, you can't have a main character that shows up halfway through the second act. You need to have a character that shows up towards the start of the movie, within the first 5 minutes. You could say that Obi-Wan's sort of the main character of Phantom Menace, but not really, because they don't give him much of a focus. Because if Obi-Wan was the main character of Phantom Menace, then he would have had a significant role. Even though if Obi-Wan was the main character, he would have gotten off the ship. He would have walked with them. But they left him on the ship to basically do nothing, while Qui-Gon, Padme, and also Jar Jar got off. See, the mistake there was letting Jar Jar leave the ship. You should have left Jar Jar on the... You let Jar Jar leave the ship? I think you should have left Jar Jar on the ship, or didn't put the character in the movie at all. Yeah. So you could have left Jar Jar on the ship, or you could have just left him out of the film entirely. That's one of the big problems. Also, you're trying to set up a future relationship as well. Trying to set up Anakin and Padme, where there's like about a 5 to 10 year age difference that doesn't really work, and makes it quite awkward in Attack of the Clones. Because all the stuff that you have to do in Phantom Menace sets up the next film, and when you look at those two together, they don't really fit properly. You need to make a cohesive film to lead into the second one, instead of just having a mess that's not really good for anyone. The problem was that George had too many people around him who couldn't say no to him. They all were just saying, yes, George, I understand. Yes, that's great. Fantastic. Let's do that. You need a director, and you need the people around him who challenge him, who want to make the best film possible, but they actually know when to say to their director, I think this would be better. There needs to be some collaboration there. They can't just be a room full of yes people just saying what the director wants to hear. You can't really go about that way. I'd also say that the death scene involving Qui-Gon was a misstep, and really that character didn't have enough development for you to care about the character's death at the end scene. I'm not saying that the character of Qui-Gon was a mistake, but you're creating a character who does not survive the events of the prequel trilogy, who does not survive the events of the prequel trilogy. You really need to make a character... Okay. What they should have done was, they should have had Obi-Wan train Anakin from the very beginning. They should have aged him up a bit, so that we have a 15-year-old kid in the first film, you have a 20-year-old kid in the second film, and you have a 25-year-old kid in the last film. So you have some progression within a short space of time. That isn't too much time that you feel like you could abandon the first film completely. Because there's a large gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. You could say that there's way too much of a gap. And you would be right about that. Because there's about a 10-year gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. You don't really see any progression with the characters. Your big ones, Anakin and Obi-Wan, you know that they're between the end of Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, there's about a 10-year gap. And towards the start of the film, you see Anakin and Obi-Wan in an elevator going up to see Padme. The stories they share together the dialogue that they share is about one specific incident. And this is George's biggest fault. He tells us about the events that have happened before, but there was no flashbacks. Or, in the previous film, you should have shown some of that. That's one of the biggest flaws. I also think that the setup of Palpatine wasn't very... wasn't good, in the sense that you really need to set up the character I also think the setup of Palpatine wasn't really well defined enough. You really need to set up the character so it's not obvious that he's going to be the villain and it's more of a twist. I know you have those original films still there, but to new viewers who are coming into the franchise, not really knowing anything, you really need to twist. You really need to give them a perception. You really need to give them a perception of Palpatine that is kind of a positive one, so that when he does reveal himself in the third film, you're actually surprised by it, instead of being like, okay, I'll just go along with that then. The problem with Phantom Menace is the characterizations of... The problem with the Phantom Menace is the characterizations. You need to set up your characters properly. Otherwise, you're not going to be compelled by them. If I would give Phantom Menace a rating, I'd say 6.2. I would say 6.2 out of 6. Because it's really an okay film, but it's not something you need to clamour about. It's not really something that we look forward to watching. It's not really something you look forward to watching a lot.